Welcome to Defining Dad Bod, where we work to untangle the messy knots of the health and fitness industry as if your children's lives depended on it. Because they do. This is where we decide to make our bodies stand for something bigger than ourselves. This is where we find practical wisdom to live by, one powerful conversation at a time. May the words spoken here inspire you to keep moving forward no matter where you are. Who knows who you could be if you could become 1% better every single day.
We can do the show thanks to the support of listeners just like you. For more information how you can become part of the inner circle, go to findingdadbod.com/inner circle.
What's up, guys? This is Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. I hope you're doing super well. I'm very excited about today's conversation with Dr. Sandi Scheinbaum. It's a timely conversation where we jump into being the CEO of your own health and fitness, while we also talk about developing a healthy relationship with your food in pursuit of your health and fitness goals, and how to navigate some of the issues you're going to encounter this holiday season. This one's chock full of wisdom and some good positive psychology practices that can be helpful to you as you do your best to navigate your 1% better through nutrition and exercise change. There are some resources in the show notes below that I referenced during the show. And so if you're interested in getting connected with Dr. Scheinbaum's work with health coaches, or if you want to investigate your own signature strengths in positive psychology, make sure you check those links out. There's some powerful stuff coming up for Defining Dad Bod in 2020 that I'm not quite ready to tell you about yet. But in the meantime, 2 reminders. 1, if you're hoping to get a virtual coaching slot for 2020 and you want to do so at a good price, now's the time to pull the trigger. Everybody and their mom is going to be looking to make some sort of change in January and February. And if you're a regular gym goer, you know the New Year's resolutioners will be in full force. And the work we do here at Defining Dad Bod is no exception. So if you want to dive into a coaching program, or you want to get something started before everybody starts coming through the floodgates in January, I definitely recommend getting in the schedule now. The good news is the way we do things around here, you don't have to commit to a long-term monthly program right up front. Instead, our virtual coaching, exercise, nutrition, and lifestyle change can start with a 1-week trial for $25. With your trial, you get a 30-minute consultation to dive into your goals and talk through what your program needs to look like. And then I'll create a personalized week for you. That week can start whenever you like. My favorite time for that to start this time of year is the week between Christmas and New Year's. And during that week, you'll get daily workouts, daily food journal accountability, and whatever support and communication you need to move on the goals that we spoke about. It's a powerful week, and by the end of the week, if you'd like to continue working with us, you'll be set up to get first dibs on a slot in 2020. And if it's not the right fit for you, no worries. I'll know that you've learned some great things, and you can take that momentum and walk into 2020 powerfully yourself. Now is an especially good time to try things because I just took on an apprentice coach here at Defining Dad Bod, and her rates are quite a bit lower than mine, although I will be programming every personalized workout that you see. You can find out more about your trial at definingdadbod.com/shop/trial week. The link's in the show notes below, and I can't wait to see your trial come across my desk. findingdadbod.com/shop/trial week. The second piece of housekeeping is if you haven't already, you can trade a positive 5-star review for Defining Dad Bod for one of our one-of-a-kind Defining Dad Bod decals. These things are floating around all over the world for our patrons, our clients, and our reviewing listeners, and I'd love to add you to the club. All you have to do is go to your iTunes, type out a quick 5-star review telling people why Defining Dad Bod has been valuable to you and why you tune in regularly. Then, screenshot your review and email that screenshot to Coach Al at definingdadbod.com. Drop your mailing address in there, and I'll make sure that when I send out next month's decals, that you get one on your doorstep, or mailbox, however they do that where you live. Again, 5-star review, screenshot, email to Coach Al at definingdadbod.com with your mailing address, and I'll make you part of her decal club. Not that that bestows any kind of privileges on you necessarily, but I hope that every time you see it, no matter where you put it, it's a reminder to you of your personal commitment to becoming 1% better every single day, and that when it's not enough to have your own personal goals, you can be reminded that you're doing this for your kids, for your family, and your community as well. Keep up the awesome work. Thanks for listening, and without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Dr. Sandra Scheinbaum. What's up, guys? This is Alex with Defining Dad Bod. I hope you're doing super well. I'm hanging out today with a very special guest, Dr. Sandra Scheinbaum. And I don't want to mess up the name there, Sandi. Did I say it right?
You were correct. You got it right. I know it's a mouthful.
It's a really cool name. You know, my last name is Van Houten. So oftentimes people are Van Houtening me and all kinds of other variations. So glad I didn't get that done with you. Now, I'm really excited about our conversation today because unlike many of the people that I bring on the show to talk about health, fitness, and exercise, physiology, biomechanics, and whatnot, you are from what I would refer to as my neck of the woods, or rather, you're more of a master in this field than I am. Perhaps I'm in your neck of the woods, and that's psychology. So a little bit of your superhero origin story, correct me if I get something wrong here, but you're super passionate about transforming the healthcare world through training health coaches to help people become CEOs of their own health. And you've spent almost 5 decades making healthcare and education more holistic and innovative. Now you have an amazing list of credentials. You've got books out in the world. You've got training certifications and programs to help people do these sorts of things with. And so I got one question for you, Sandra. What drives you to do all of what you're doing right now? And then we're going to get into the psychology of food and talk about health coaching specifically. But I really want to know what's driving you forward. I mean, you could have called it quits a while ago.
What's driving me is my purpose, passion of that purpose to really help. We have sick care right now. We don't have health care. And I know that the answer is through this system called functional medicine, where you dig down to the root causes of why are people getting sick. And then we're training health coaches to be the ones who are going to go out into the world, who are going to partner with people and really help them transform their health, help them have more energy, help them with this onslaught of chronic disease and how to not only manage it, but going even a step further, that they can even think about ways to reverse it, and it's through diet and lifestyle. So I personally have a lot of energy, and it's part of my being. Zest, love of learning. I used to think it was ADD years ago. I'm sitting on a bouncy ball chair right now. If I wasn't sitting here, I would be on my treadmill. I have a treadmill desk. So I always like to keep moving. And that includes moving forward. So yeah, when I turned 65, I was just not about to retire and play canasta or mahjong with my friends.
Not time for that. Maybe 30 years from now, right?
Even then, I'm going to keep going forward.
I love it. So zest, that's funny you bring that up. That's actually one of the traits in positive psychology that the positive psychologists talk about, which we'll speak on in a moment. But a personal story real quick. I was that kid who you had to give silly putty to make sure he was listening to you in class, you know? And so when we studied that in psychology courses and I was reading through what zest actually meant, I was like, oh, it's not a disease. It's just part of what I do. So I share that in common with you. I'm standing, and as you can tell, I can't stop moving either. So knuckle bump to you across the way.
Yes, I love it.
Glad to have a fellow zesty person on here. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today, I don't get the opportunity to speak often on the show with somebody who's an expert in psychology in the same vein as being an expert in functional medicine. As I understand it, you're one of the pioneers of that sort of duo of mastery. And so one of the things I would love to talk to you about today, with the holidays coming up and something we cover pretty frequently on the show, which is the relationship with food. Let's dive a little bit into the psychology of the relationship with food, which is a huge topic. So I'll just make it really easy. As an expert in this field, what would you say are some tips to help people create a healthy relationship with their food?
So this is one of my favorite topics because it's really, as we look at what choices we're going to eat regarding our foods, how we're going to eat, when we're going to eat, how much we're going to eat, our whole relationship with food is really based on who we are as an individual, our personality, our family of origin, our culture, our religion, our friends, and then the greater society, all the influences from the advertising world, big food, for example, the big companies. So there's so many factors that come into play. So I think that it starts with mindfulness, with awareness. So as we approach a holiday season, the first thing to know is that we are programmed to associate certain foods with certain holidays. So if we say Christmas, what comes to mind? Okay, perhaps it's Christmas cookies with sprinkles on them. I'm Jewish, so if you say Hanukkah, Hanukkah, what does that mean? Latkes. We're grating the potatoes. We're frying up latkes. Okay, they go hand in hand. How I could taste them, I could picture them as I'm talking. 4th of July, what does that mean? Barbecue. We have hot dogs, hamburgers. So all of these traditions, if you are from another part of the world, you're going to have traditions that are different, and your holidays or your religion, you're going to have associations. And these are very deeply rooted, and we can't divorce them from our childhood because we have memories of being with our grandma and making these foods, and it's part of the ritual. And where a conflict sometimes comes in, or often comes in, is we may set out to eat in a different way. And what happens is then that can create conflict. It can create internal conflict and frequently creates family conflict. And I want to share a story, and my daughters still remember this. So when they were growing up, it was the height of the fat-free, like fat is bad, it's going to kill you, you can't have any fat. And so I bought into that, and I bought into all these health trends at the time. And so I was raising my little girls who were vegans. Okay, everything that was meat's bad and fat is bad. So we're at Thanksgiving. My sister-in-law is making the meal. And not only we're not eating the turkey, and I shudder to think of all those tofurkeys that I made, which are probably less healthy. Now I make the real thing, the good turkey, and thinking that I was doing the right thing back then. Well, it wasn't. And then we got to the stuffing. Okay, well, what happens when you're low fat or fat free is you're becoming a carbaholic, a breadaholic. And so that's what I was doing with my daughters. They craved carbs, as did I at the time. So, okay, so we're eating this stuffing, and it's really good. And then find out. And so I tell my sister-in-law, I love this recipe. Oh yeah, it was the schmaltz that really made it good. Okay, so schmaltz is a word that means chicken fat. Okay, it's disgusting, the most high fat, saturated fat. And so now I'm like, okay, get it off their plates. Oh no. And I was so angry and so upset. So what's happening here? I was micromanaging the food choices and ignoring the relationship and ignoring that this is a holiday. And what's really central about holidays, why do we celebrate? What's most profound is our relationships and our connections. And so what was destructive is I was getting upset. What happens when you get upset? Well, you can't digest your food. So I was doing myself more harm. I was doing my daughters more harm. Other, people were upset. My husband, who didn't buy into how I was eating, thought it was crazy, that I was overreacting about the fat. And so that frequently happens. And when I was working as a psychologist and coach, I would have a lot of clients who would dread going home for the holidays. Oh, the whole Christmas is coming, Thanksgiving. I know it's going to be a fight because I, don't eat that way anymore, and they're going to force this food on me. So we need to look at sorting it out. So of course, if you have celiac, if you are gluten-free, then you would choose not to eat particular foods. If you're celiac, it is, of course, you cannot. And so you would let people know, and you would perhaps, many people bring their own food to combine. But it is also occasionally there will be a mistake made. Some foods will enter the picture, or you might eat something, a dessert, and you swore beforehand you weren't going to. And we really thrive when we can let go and move on. And so we always have the next meal, the chance. Our bodies are super resilient, and they can be restored. They can heal. And so keeping that in mind. And so we can only be imperfect. We can't eat perfectly. And so as we're approaching the holidays, there are certain things we can honor with our traditions. And maybe we want to find different versions. There's gluten-free versions of just about everything. There's versions that are using organic ingredients, so that we look at ways that we can make it as compliant as we want to be with how we're eating, and then letting go of all the rest. Because at the end of the day, it is the relationship that counts. And so somebody puts love into food, and that is going to override micromanaging the ingredients that were used.
Oh, that's such good advice. I'm here in Arkansas, which is like deep South, and part of when you were talking about holidays, I was like, man, she read my menu from last year. It sounds like. So for Thanksgiving, Nana makes the most amazing apple dumplings in the entire world. And I won't describe them because my listeners will probably then have a triggered sugar craving, and perhaps, this show doesn't need to be that for them. But I remember at a particular time in my life where I was working to make positive body composition change for myself. I remember she served this at the dinner table. And I remember like the switch in my head. It was like, it's an insult not to, like, she peels each individual apple the way they need to be peeled. She went to the actual orchard and picked these a month ago, like she's been preparing for this thing. And it's not only a ritual, but almost like a family offering, like a very positive and powerful connection for us. And so when she served this, it was like, it's like inhuman to say no. It's not just like, I would really like to eat this. It's like a offensive thing, So I remember at that point in time, one, I wasn't so concerned with it as a trainer of 14 years. I'm like, well, hey man, one day out of 365 isn't going to kill me. But also one of the things that I've worked to help my clients with when they come to those situations is like, look, if you know you're going to be with family and you know that food is part of the ritual, then if you can shape your good habits on a regular basis and your workout program such that you might actually make good use of those carbohydrates, I say do leg day before apple dumplings and we're going to be in a good spot. Then what happens is everything's working as synergistically as possible without the added anxiety or stress of affecting your familial relationships in a negative way. Have you given advice that's similar and along those lines?
Absolutely. I love that. So you can become adapted. And the longer you are doing some things like intermittent fasting, or you have part of your ritual where you have a workout routine, then that, as well as let's say you are on a more ketogenic diet, and you are avoiding carbohydrates you're avoiding processed food in general. And so that is going to crowd out, those good habits will crowd out what may happen occasionally a few times a year. There are certain circumstances with celiac. If somebody is diabetic and really needs to monitor, then you would let family members know. And if somebody loves you, wants to take care of you, then they're not going to be holding a fork up to your face and saying, here, you must eat this. But if somebody is just choosing to avoid foods or doesn't have a severe chronic health problem, then you have the sense that it's about balance and you adjust. And often the stress of thinking, oh, I'm going to dread overeating or getting into a confrontation is going to upset your system and ultimately cause more havoc with your digestion, for example. Or every time we get upset and we get angry, it's very inflammatory. And so the inflammation caused by those emotions may be much stronger type of inflammation than what you're going to get by taking a little bite of your Nana's delicious dumplings.
Yeah, well said. So I have one more question along these lines for the holidays, since I've got you held captive, and then we can move into a little bit of positive psychology and then health coaching, which I'm very excited to talk to you about. The question is this: I find often when I work with clients that they'll bring a situation to the table that sounds a lot more like there is almost like an external judgment for people in their lives who haven't quite made the changes that they probably should make from a nutrition and exercise perspective to become more healthy. And so you go home for the holidays and you confront that, you encounter that, and you hear things like, wow, you're really losing a lot of weight there. You look too skinny. We need to fatten you up, or something along those lines. Or it might be, you're really too strict with what it is that you're doing. I have, kind of my own toolkit of supportive recommendations for clients there, but I'd love to hear from you if you're in the situation, psychologically speaking, where you are making decisions and choices about your food, but perhaps your familial unit isn't necessarily supportive of those choices. Do you have any advice for somebody who might be in that situation to navigate that space well?
So we tend to upset ourselves based on not having full access to all facts. What you just described is so common. I've experienced myself. And so what to do? Well, one of the things, it always helps to rehearse, like you're rehearsing to be in a play. And so you imagine a comment like that. You imagine yourself breezing through it. Like, no big deal. I can stand this. I'm strong. I'm tough. I'm working. I'm resilient. And so if they said this, does this mean that they're an awful, horrible person? Is there some other reason why they're saying it? Could it be that they're actually admiring, that they're really focusing on their own sense of failure, that they can't do it? Or even if they are very staunch in their beliefs, like there's something wrong with you because you've gone down this path to be healthier, well, okay, I can still, was there ever a time when this person acted kindly towards you, did something good for you? What are the values that they have that you would still appreciate? And so you go there to realize it's a mixed bag. We're imperfect. And so we may say things that are inappropriate, we may act badly, but that doesn't mean that we are inherently a bad person. And so basically, you forgive them. The power of forgiveness is huge. There's been a lot of research on that. So you let it go. And it can also work the opposite, because when somebody changes their habits, particularly around food, they're now often a zealot, proselytizing.
Yeah.
I'm a vegan or I'm a carnivore, and therefore carbs are bad and nobody should eat. And so even, with facial expressions, with body language, there can be then subtle interactions that take place that are not so healthy. And I certainly experienced that, because those daughters of mine that were raised vegan, well, what do you think they did when they went away to college? You think they stayed vegans once they got a taste of that dorm food or went out with their friends? No. So, and they talk about like, oh, how uncomfortable it was. Like we would go out to dinner during that period, and, they would order something on the menu, and they would see my facial, even though I was not saying anything. They knew how I felt about it, and it created conflict. The same, with my husband, where as I've changed how I eat and he has not, it's certainly a source of conflict. This is very common in couples where one person changes and the other doesn't, and how you navigate that can be challenging. So we want to look at our food choices as being what's best for me, not what's best for you. Because there also is an explosion of research now that we have advanced genetic testing and this whole field of nutrigenomics. It's personalized. So one person may be thriving on a more higher carbohydrate, avoiding red meat, for example. Somebody else needs to have more of a diet that is higher in saturated fat. Well, there's no one size fits all. And often what will happen in our relationships is we'll learn something, we'll read a book, we'll adopt a new way of eating, and we'll think, well, everybody, including everybody in my family, needs to be eating this way. And biologically, that may not be the case.
Man, I'm so glad you said that. You just earned a spot right here in my heart for that, doctor. I appreciate you. Well, in addition, as research continues forward, we're also finding that there are interactions with our microbiome, for instance, with our foods and stuff, and we all carry those individual fingerprints around. So I appreciate that. That's such good advice. I hope that whoever's listening to this will rewind it and listen to that again if you think that you're going to be encountering some of these difficult conversations or difficult interactions as the holidays come up. So last psychology question for you, and then we'll get into health coaching. So positive psychology is a very, in my circles, I think, a very little known field compared to the rest of the psychological literature. And it's not because it's not important. It's because of the way that we approach medicine. And I won't get on a soapbox too much, but I really wanted to hear your thoughts on this. And that is, traditional psychology, as we think about it, is the treatment of disorder. Like we could say ADHD, depression, anxiety, suicidal tendencies or thoughts, anorexia, nervosia, bulimia, things like that. How do we help somebody who's in a rough spot might be the best way to put it, right? Positive psychology, and correct me if I'm wrong, when when I first started studying this was the idea, hey, how are the people who are thriving in life, how are they doing that? And what can we learn from that to help people who might not be necessarily diseased, so to speak, psychologically, but that would like to self-actualize, to take themselves and their lives to the next level, increasing their quality and quantity of life, psychologically, physically, and whatnot. So unless I've gotten that wrong, and correct me if I'm wrong, what do you believe from the practice of positive psychology? And would you have any resources that you'd like to direct people to if they're interested in learning more about it?
I love positive psychology because we are probably wired. It's more natural to go to what's wrong with others, what's wrong with us. And so the field of psychology, as you so beautifully said, evolved what's wrong with people and came up with classification of disorders. And when I was getting my doctorate, I actually thought I was a really bad diagnostician because we'd be in a conversation about a case and, they how bipolar this person is, or slapping some diagnosis on. I think, I just like what's right with them? And so I was practicing positive psychology for many, many years before it had a name. And around the mid-90s, Martin Seligman, who is then president of the American Psychological Association, came up with this idea of looking at what's right with people, how people thrive. And so they began to study people who were thriving. And they, in particular, what has interested me is the study of character strengths. So Dr. Seligman and a bunch of other scholars got together, and this took years, and they looked at the writings from philosophy, from psychology, religion. They looked around the world, different cultures, and found that there are these universal characteristics, and it all boiled down to 24. And we call those our character strengths. And so that is how we thrive. Now, what is thriving? Well, that was another question. So thriving, it comes down to, there's an acronym called PERMA. And if you remember those letters, so PERMA. So the P stands for positive emotions. We need positive emotions. So if we're walking around and we're turning everything into a negative, then that's going to affect us emotionally and physically. The E stands for engagement. Some call it flow. So what does that mean? So I'm talking to you right now, and I'm not focusing on anything else, what I'm going to eat the rest of the day. I'm in flow in this conversation. And so I'm totally present and engaged. And we do that, we get lost in things. If we're creating something, writing, playing the piano, listening to somebody, we want to be in that state of flow. And then the R stands for relationships. We want relationships that are positive and significant in our lives. And then the M stands for meaning and purpose. My life has meaning. And then the A is accomplishment. This doesn't have to be big things. We're not talking about getting an A on a course. It has to, that can count, of course, but it has to do with little things. So today I woke up and I didn't hit the snooze button. So that was I accomplished it. Yay. It can be very tiny things. And we put those together, and those are the elements of thriving. Now, how do we get there? Well, we get there through our character strengths. So I just mentioned that I woke up, I didn't go back to sleep. Well, that was a character strength called self-regulation. And we have these 24 strengths. They work in tandem. And what we do at our coaching program is we teach our coaches to use their own strengths as they're becoming a coach, but also to help people access them. The cool thing about these strengths is that you can identify, there are some that come to the top. They're your signature strengths, and you can learn what they are and you can use them. And what we do is we reverse thinking what's wrong with you. So I used to think that I was restless and I had a short attention span and I couldn't stick with things. And so that was later considered, it's zest, it's energy, it's a life force to continue to move on. But when we're stuck in what's wrong with us and we're given that label, whether it's ADD or depression, or then we stay stuck and that defines us. We say, I'm a depressed person, for example.
And it's so powerful. I had a series that I talked through called Exercise in the Brain. And one of the things that I talked about was my struggles with being labeled ADHD. And, I'm still working on this. This is something I'll say in common parlance, like, just lost that thought, ADD moment, right? For me, it's not as productive as understanding that as a gift or a strength. It's funny you talk about that. I have a 4-year-old and he seems destined to walk the path of zest as well in a 4-year-old who has very little inhibitory executive function, meaning he can't control himself very well. That can be really frustrating and challenging, right? And so it's funny because my wife and I will regularly come to the table together, literally come to the table and talk through, hey, this is a very, very powerful and great character strength for this kid. It's going to allow him to do so many wonderful things in life. At the same time, we have to teach him to make the best of it, which is a different conversation than we got to regulate the ADD in this child. So anyway, that being said, I would encourage, I guess, anybody listening to this who wants to get deeper into this to make sure that you hear about what's going on with Sandi's health coaching. Because if you're teaching your coaches, and we'll talk about this in a second, if you're teaching your coaches to really harness the power of these character traits in both themselves, but also in the people that they're coaching, then you guys are on another level with regard to coaching. And I've been around the block. So high five, chick. Let's talk then about some health coaching, because that can mean its own thing. And you have a very specific definition of what health coaching actually is and what it can do in the space. So what is a health coach, and what is it that you and your organization are doing to rise up a group of professional and capable health coaches right now?
A coach really is the one that can inspire passion and purpose in others, and they can help people change when change is hard, because often people come to change. They're excited about, they want to change, but it can be really, really hard. And so in many things in life, it's hard. So coaching came from humanistic psychotherapy. And I was back in the day trained in that approach. It is very different from the kind of psychoanalytic process. It means you're completely with somebody in whatever direction they want to go. It's client-centered, and it's really respecting that individual. So what may happen is somebody may think that they're inspired to change. Maybe it's after the holidays, or maybe they're going to go into the holidays with a different way. They want to really clean up their eating. They want to get on an exercise routine. They want to manage stress better. They want to have better sleep. And maybe they're doing this on their own, or maybe they've been to a professional, a nutritionist, a doctor. And so they're told they have to do it. But where do they start? And there's so many areas that they may work on. So what happens is that excitement that starts out like really, really high when life gets in the way, or maybe they have a setback, they're not compliant one day, and then, I blew it again. And that's that negative, I'll never do this. This is too hard. I can't, or I'll do it after the holidays, or I'll do it in the summer, or after the kids go back to school, or there's always some postponement that, can be convenient. So what a coach does is a number of things. A coach asks questions, and they would start out from some real profound questions. We're getting at meaning and purpose, one of those parts of PERMA. What matters most to you? What brings you joy? What do you want to live for? Picture yourself in 10 years. Or what do you want life to be like for you? What do you want your health for? And what that person who's asked that question may do then is tell them their dream. Well, I, want to be active. I want to be traveling. I want to be serving others. I want to be at my grandchildren's wedding. So it is looking at something that would be a dream, or something where they want to be. Or it could be, I just want to have enough energy. I want to be able to be vital, to keep my mind sharp. So the coach would then dial that back to, okay, now ultimately it's a discussion of, where do you want to start? Where are you ready to start? And it's really, really tiny goals, really tiny steps. And it's whatever the client wants. So maybe the doctor thinks that where they need to start is to change their eating and lose some weight. But maybe that individual is dealing with a lot of stress, in a relationship, at work, and they really want to focus on that. And so the coach would then go there. So the coach, we train our coaches to really listen. And part of that process is to observe and really honor that individual's strengths. So for example, in functional medicine, we look at a person's whole history. It's the timeline. So if they developed an illness, some chronic condition, they'll say, well, what was your life like 6 months before that or a year? And often then the client starts to connect the dots to what was driving it. Maybe they were in a house that had mold, for example, or maybe they got divorced. And so it's putting those pieces together. And then the client may have been really describing to the coach their resilience, maybe their bravery. And so the coach would point out, you've been pretty perseverant in going to doctors or looking online, finding answers to why you're feeling this way. You haven't given up. That's a great strength to be perseverant. It took a lot of bravery to deal with the situation that you just described. And so, or creativity. Creative solutions. So coaches who we train learn to use these character strengths to help people deal with the challenges that they're experiencing and ultimately to thrive.
Man, you're making all the wheels turn in my head as, part of what I imagine you could sympathize with in the training industry is when I first started working with people, I started working with people who were interested in bench pressing more weight and learning how to squat correctly and things like that. And what it quickly turned into over a course of about 2 to 3 years was getting off of my medications that I recently had to take on because of, pre-diabetes or keeping up with my grandkids or rehabilitating this injury that keeps recurring. And there were so many things that the training certification didn't prepare me for in that vein. Not that any education is all encompassing necessarily, but it's funny. One of the things that you're talking about is something that I feel that I've learned through the School of Hard Knocks is that there's a difference between training an athlete and coaching an all-encompassing exercise, nutrition, and lifestyle change. And that oftentimes, scientifically speaking or objectively, physiologically speaking, the first step in the right direction is not exactly the same as the first step that the person is ready to take or willing to take or excited to continue taking daily, right? And so it's so powerful that you and your team are rising up a generation of coaches who can do this well. Now, my question to you is, one of your passions, I understand, is believing that coaching is perhaps one of, or if not the answer to our sick care industry as opposed to healthcare industry. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on there and why you think coaching is what's going to stand in the gap of what sick care can't do? And I'm sorry not to preface this too far, but let's make sure our listeners are on board here. Sick care is when you go get an antibiotic because you have strep throat, right? That's different from I'm having trouble losing weight. I feel very low energy. I'm anxious all the time. Do you have a pill for that? That's a little bit different because there are so many factors that could play into your ability to lose weight and your irritability and how energetic you feel. And there could be a lot more to it than you're deficient in antibiotics. So that's what I mean by the difference between sick care, quote, and healthcare. So help me understand in your mind why you believe that health coaches are really what's going to stand in this gap.
Well, first of all, sick care, there's a place. It's not like we want to do away with it.
Right.
So acute care, we have some of the best, most advanced technology, medical intervention. So if you are having a heart attack, you don't want to have a health coach. You want to be in the emergency room. You want to go to your hospital, the hospital that has the latest acute care for that. If you break your leg, you don't need a coach for that. You're going to get an x-ray, you're going to get a cast, you're going to be told what to do to take care of it and heal. So that first line of care, we need sick care. And then where we're falling short is with these chronic medical conditions, prediabetes, diabetes, obesity. And so the system evolved and it works really well for those acute care, trauma type situations, for example. But why is it not working for chronic medical conditions? It's because where are these conditions treated? So a heart attack is treated at a hospital. You need surgical intervention, your appendix burst. Okay, you need to be in that hospital taking care of that. But the doctor's office, the hospital is not the place to treat obesity. Where do you treat obesity? Well, in your kitchen, out on the walking path, in the gym that you go to. Those are the treatment centers, because it's the individual who chooses the most powerful medicine is what you put on the end of your fork, the decisions you make, what to eat, how am I going to move my body, how much sleep am I going to get. And so it is in each individual's home or the gym there, out in nature. And that's where the coaches can go. Coaches can work with people at that level, can help them to prepare meals, can help them to really make those behavioral changes. And one of the ways that they work very beautifully is in groups. We teach that model because people love to connect with one another. And so they can facilitate groups where people come together to work together to make these kinds of changes. It is also then economical. So working with a coach is more economical than going into the medical system that is getting some of these medications, for example. And then when you get to groups, that is even more economical. So it's a way to serve people who are not being served or can't afford healthcare. And most doctors now are within a medical system where they only have 7 minutes or maybe 10 at the most. They can only focus on one condition at a time. And so there's this huge gap then. They are overwhelmed, they're burned out, they can't take care of these kind of chronic health conditions that we're increasingly seeing. And so health coaches can educate, they can inspire people to make changes, and the world is taking notice. So there's some really huge changes taking place. So what this means is that we now have a national board for certifying health and wellness coaches. And what's coming out is it's on the path towards insurance reimbursement. The American Medical Association has introduced procedural codes, which is the first step towards seeing this reimbursed. More and more hospital systems, doctors are waking up and saying they need a coach in their practice, or they're going to refer to a coach. So it's whereas as it got started initially, it was unheard of concept. It is now really getting into the mainstream.
So well said. And I think one of the things that I'd like to highlight there is the training necessary to communicate effectively with somebody so that they're able to agree on the way forward that's going to make the biggest difference for them and is going to stick. And I studied pre-med prior to becoming who I am today. And one of the things that I learned was that outside of the bedside manner side of the equation, which is like, how do I help you feel a little bit better about the fact that I'm about to bring you into surgery and treat you like shop class, in orthopedic surgery would be a good example of that. Outside of that piece, many doctors don't actually get formal education, similar to how they don't get education around nutrition. It's not a 1-hour course. Nutrition is a very, very complex study and field of work and understanding. But the psychology required to be able to communicate effectively with somebody, I think one of the things that dietitians go through, we call it motivational interviewing, right? Which is the ability to communicate with somebody in a way that helps them to feel a part of the process and a partnership, that they're kind of steering their own ship as opposed to dependent upon you for a professional service and unable to meander this road on their own, right? So one of the things you bring out there is just the necessity, if we're going to take things from a sick care situation, or, if you've broken an arm or you have an infection or whatever, yes, you want that. But if we're going to talk about healthcare, that is a thing where you get to become, as you like to say, the CEO of your own health. And that requires a very different sort of professional than somebody who knows anatomy really well and needs to be able to make the right cuts when they matter and, knows the pharmaceutical interactions side by side and stuff. It's a very different specialization. And you, of all people, given your proclivities to mastery in both psychology and functional medicine, know that there's a deep gap there. So I think one of the things I would love to hear from you is if somebody who's listening to this is interested in becoming a health coach themselves, I understand that you and your organization have conduits and pathways for that. Can you tell me a bit about how somebody would go about doing that, what they could expect through that process, and also what the future looks like for somebody who's a certified health coach?
Yes. So they would go to functionalmedicinecoaching.org. We have a program. It is 12 months. It's all online. And I want to point out that often people think, well, I see myself doing this, but oh no, I don't have any background as a healthcare professional. I never studied this in school. Am I going to be able to do this? Well, the answer is yes. What do you need to be a health coach? It's a passion, a calling to serve people, to really see this as meaning and purpose to your life. We have people who come from all walks of life. We have those who have been stay-at-home moms for years, and they're thinking, oh, this is something that I would like to do because it's all online, and you can increasingly be a coach 100% online. You can have clients all over the world. And we have others who have been in a corporate setting, and they are making the shift. We have people who have been in marketing and advertising, in really many different professions. There often somebody has had a chronic illness themselves, and they have seen the tremendous power of lifestyle changes, dietary changes, and want to now serve others. Sometimes it is for somebody who wants to do this on the side. In other words, maybe they have a good corporate job or good benefits. They don't want to leave their current work, but they study this, and two things happen. They can start to apply this in their own work setting or family setting. They tell us all the time, we're better individuals. We're better at our current job. Then maybe they have a coaching profession on the side where they start to work on the side. We also have those who have been in healthcare. We have a lot of nurses, a lot of people who have been nutritionists, dietitians, in wellness, personal trainers, yoga, Pilates instructors, and we have dentists, we have pharmacists. And so again, they're applying it to their current work, or they are switching hats. And so now they have a different hat that they're wearing. And so they still have their patients, but in coaching, we call them clients. And then they have another practice or business where it's very clear to the person they're serving there that this is for coaching. So a lot of different possibilities, but you do not need a healthcare background to become a coach, becoming a good listener or being a good listener, because coaching is all about what that individual wants. We have therapists. I do want to point out that coaching is not therapy. You will not be acting as a therapist or doing psychotherapy, but coaches do support people emotionally. And so there is some similarity, but there are also definite boundaries.
Well said. And so if somebody connected with this and they started working through the online program, it's 12 months long. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then what does the testing procedure look like? Because I understand there's a difference between a certification and then board certification.
Yes. So when they graduate from FMCA, they have a certificate of completion. So we have certified them, but really the person or the organization that can grant certification is a board, a professional body, and that is the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaching. So we are a school that is approved by this board, and that means our graduates can sit for their exam, and what they do then after they pass the exam, and it's not this horrific, really impossible exam. It's a lot of just common sense and using your inner wisdom, and we help you. We have our graduates form study groups and work together for that, and then they can become now their board certified health and wellness coaches. And we are seeing this explosion of demand. Now, what happens when we train people in the functional medicine methodology paired with what we've been talking about, positive psychology, coaching skills, mind-body medicine, psychology of eating. And our partner is the Institute for Functional Medicine, IFM. IFM trains the doctors, the practitioners. And so what happens is these doctors are now looking for our graduates. Why is that? Because they know that they speak the same language. They've been taught by the same senior faculty as IFM. They have the same content. And so increasingly then they are getting out of their training saying, I want to coach. And at IFM, they are teaching us. They are teaching these doctors training in functional medicine. You can't do it alone. You need a team, and you need a coach on your team to really help work with your patients on these areas of changing their behaviors, their diet, their lifestyle.
So well said. And one of the things that I've been following very closely as a trainer for a long time was the recent approval of the insurance codes for this sort of thing, because that means that as this becomes something that more and more people are understanding is a necessity in healthcare as opposed to sick care, then people can start billing their insurance for access to a coach like this. So as I understand it, there are several that are working to get on board with that. In your mind, how long do you think it's going to be before this is a regular thing, before you go home for the holidays and somebody says, my health coach and I had this conversation about how I'm going to talk to you people?
Yeah. So right now that the approval by the AMA, American Medical Association, is for what's called Category 3 codes. They're for individual coaching as well as group coaching. To use those codes, you must be a board certified coach, which makes sense because when I was a psychologist, I was licensed by the state of Illinois and was only licensed psychologist who could bill insurance, not somebody who was unlicensed. They couldn't even call themselves a psychologist. They were psychotherapists.
Right.
So Category 3 means that the AMA have identified coaching as a promising service. So they're looking at it and they're saying, oh, literature's pretty good. Like, this is up and coming. And think of it like a trend. Okay. It's trend now.
Yeah, there you go.
So if now a lot of people are using the code, they're going to track that and they're going to say, oh, this is sticking. People are using this code. This is real and it's growing. And then it'll be bumped up to what's called Category 1. And that it's this huge, there's like thousands of, every little thing is a procedure. You go to the hospital and you have one little intervention. There's like hundreds of procedure codes for all of these interventions and services.
Right.
And so though it's probably, a few years down the road, but the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaching is working very closely with the AMA for insurance to become a reality. But in the meantime, it's not all, 0% chance of being reimbursed. For example, shared medical visits. So if we encourage all of our graduates to work with medical doctors, to be part of their team, to where they're getting referrals, or they can go into those offices, they can lead shared medical visits. And as long as certain criteria are met, insurers are paying, Medicare is on board. There's codes for use of remote patient monitoring devices. Like if you have an app on your phone and you're monitoring something related to your medical condition, the coach can be involved, and that's reimbursable as well.
Fantastic. I'm so excited about this that I could talk to you for a very long time, but believe it or not, in our flow state here, we've come up on an hour, which is wild. I love conversations like that. So I did want to give you an opportunity to have the last word on the show. If people don't hear anything else from you today, Sandi, what do you hope to leave them with as they're walking into November and December of this year?
To have big, bold dreams that anything is possible, and to really have clarity of what you want. And then you can dial it back to how you get the steps to get there. So walking into the holidays, what you want is a loving, peaceful experience. Imagine it fully. And nothing that happens is going to upset me. If you want a new career, you want to be a coach, dream about that big. What would that look like? How can you pursue that and make it happen?
Awesome. Thank you for that. I'm going to put the links to all of your resources and material below. Otherwise, I imagine I'll probably want to talk to you again sometime soon. But for everybody else, this has been Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod here with Dr. Sandra Scheinbaum. Thank you so much for joining us. And to our listeners, kick butt, take names.
The free practical advice and conversations here remain unbought and unbiased thanks to the support of listeners just like you. For more information on how you can become a part of the inner circle of Defining Dad Bod, go to definingdadbod.com/inner circle.